Alright guys, how you doing? It's Rabea, hope everyone's well. So I really hope you enjoyed the first episode of my drum programming, mixing and editing tutorials. It was great fun to do. I'm really glad it's been useful for people, and yeah, basically we're on to episode number 2. So in this episode I want to just delve a little deeper into the Superior Drummer plugin, how you can use it and integrate it into your DAW a little bit more efficiently, and how you would go about maybe programming more complex drum parts. And how I'm going to do that is I'm going to demonstrate that by drumming along with my fingers on my MIDI keyboard to some pre-recorded guitars. And what's cool about this is it's going to show you how you would go about adapting the drums to the guitar with regards to rhythms and stuff. For all those who didn't manage to see episode 1, and if you are interested in getting into drum programming, I've done the first episode, which is basically a really simple tutorial, and that's in the description box below. I've also included the tune track progressive foundry template that I created in the description box below as well. So if you do want to use my template, feel free to download that and then it'll be up and running for you. Hopefully you can see Logic is set up here. I've got my pre-recorded guitars in my arrange window and I've got a Superior Drummer track set up. Please bear in mind that I'm using Logic Pro X. You might have a different DAW, but for me this is my favourite one and it's the one that I know how to work in best. So there will be a similar method that you can use for say Cubase or Pro Tools, but for me I'm doing it in Logic. So I'm sorry if it's not the same for you guys that aren't using Logic, but for all those who are, this is how you'd go about doing it. The first thing I'm going to show you is how to go about creating aux sends from Superior out into your own DAW. In other words, how to send each drum and cymbal and microphone to its own track in Logic so that we can mix things in more detail. So the first thing to do is to go to the Superior Drummer plugin. As you can see, we've got a construct, and then I'm going to go to the Mixer tab. Now, as you can see, we've got all our channels open, ready to, basically what's active and what's not. And how we can tell where it's going is by going down to the output. So just here, you've got your output line, and you can see they're all going out 1, 2, out 1, 2, out 1, 2. They're all going to out 1, 2. If I want to create aux sends, in other words, separate tracks, I need to do that first and foremost in Logic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my main instrument track, which is Superior. And as you can see on the bottom right, there's a little plus sign. If I click it, it creates an aux. So I'm going to keep clicking, and it should give us 16 if I'm not mistaken. If I keep going, you'll see they're all coming out there. And yeah, so it goes up to aux 15, but we've also got the first instrument track. So in total there are 16. So if I go back into Superior now, that I've got my aux channels sent and they're all there, I can start to send each individual microphone to one of these channels. Now it's time to send our microphones to the channel strips. So if we look on the mixer window in Superior Drummer, you can see my kick channel, and I'm going to want this kick to go to out 1 and 2, so the first one. And you can see if it's working by looking on our channel strip in Logic, clicking the kick drum, and there it is. So now I'm going to want I think I'm going to want the D112, so if I go out 3 and 4, so if I go and click that, can you see this? We've got a new aux being sent here. So that means I'm sending that signal somewhere else. I'm sending that to my second aux. For any microphone that you don't want to use, just make sure you go and say none, so that it's not getting sent anywhere, because sometimes you can get loads of mics being sent to the same channel and it becomes a nightmare. So for everything that you're not using, make sure you turn it off. So we've got out 1 and 2, 3 and 4. I'm going to go kick sub 5 and 6, and now I'm on to my snares. So 7 and 8, 9 and 10, 11 and 12, so on and so forth. Now if I show you what that looks like, if I select my construct and you pay attention to the channel strips, you can see all my instruments are coming out through the channel strips. If you're wondering why there are 3 snares going off at the same time, that's because we have 3 different snare mics. So if I solo one, here's the top. Here's another microphone for the snare. And then the third microphone. that would be the snare bottom. What's great about that is it means that I can individually mix those microphones however I want. It's fantastic. The next thing to bear in mind, if we go back to our mixer window, is that there are more microphones than there are aux sends. Now, if you use too many microphones, things get a little bit complex and a little bit hard to manage, especially if you're starting out with regards to drum programming and mixing. So I would suggest just using 16 different mics. So you've got the obvious ones, which is kick, snare, toms, overheads, but then our ambient microphones are where it gets interesting. So if I shoot across to my ambient ones, over on the right here, I can see ambient far, ambient close. Now, some of these aren't activated, and the reason is because Superior just creates a generic template for you to work from. So to turn them on, simply go to that channel, ambient close, click edit. As you can see, nothing is turned on here. We've got nothing coming through ambient far. So I'm going to go select all, click the lights, and there you go. Now we've got ambient far fully activated, fully ready to go. And those are all individual bleed settings. So it means that on the ambient mic, I'm going to be able to hear the rack tom, any of the rack toms or any of the kick or snare, and I can turn those off if I don't want to hear them in that ambient mic, which is sort of playing with physics a bit in the real world, but because it's all software based, we can do anything we want. So that's how you create aux sends. You simply go to the output in the mixer window of the Superior plugin and select where you want that to go. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to load up my Superior template so that you can see I've already done this, I've already gone ahead and set it up. So now that that's loaded, if I go to my mixer window, you can see here how I've got out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and you can see they're all being sent. The ones I'm not using are switched off. So that's giving us a bit of everything. We've got all the drums, some overheads, some close ambient, some far ambient. We've got a bit of everything. So it should sound really nice. Now, as far as I'm concerned, for an input drum recording that's not being mixed, that's, you know, that's luxury. That's some of the best you're going to get. Now, if you look on the channel strips, you can see snares coming through. We got it on the overheads. We got it on the ambience. Loads of different. Which, if you ask me, I think that's one of the most amazing things about Superior Drummer, is the realism in what you're getting to work with. That is a room impulse that you are hearing being triggered via MIDI. It's just so impressive, blows my mind every time, and it makes it so much fun to create music at home. Anyway, now that we've got all our aux sends set up, we've got this template working, it would be a wise idea to label all your auxes in the mixer window, but for the sake of ease and time, I'm not going to bother. Let's have a look at this bit of guitar work then. Okay, so at this point you should be able to understand how to send all your drums to an aux send. You should be able to understand how to go about programming drums very basically. If you're not, I've got the link to the first video in the description. At this point we're going to start programming some drums to these guitars. So this is where it takes a little bit more of your sort of musical ear to work out what's the best type of drums to go with this guitar part. For me, I'm really focusing on that constant push. So I think would be good for the kick drum. So I've got my keyboard set up with my, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to program some drums to these guitars. Okay, so we've got some drums played in there, and what I need to do now is just go ahead and quantize them, because unfortunately the way I'm capturing the audio means I've got two audio streams running to different places, and that's causing some unwanted and very inconvenient latency on the MIDI keyboard, which is making it increasingly difficult to drum in time. However, we can work with it. We can work with it. Firstly, I'm assuming that because this song's in a straight time signature and all the rhythms are basically 16th note accents thrown around all over the place, I'm going to quantize all my drums to 16th notes and see what we get. Okay, just to recap, you're in piano roll on Logic, and the quantization is over on the right, on the left hand side, with the drop down menu of all the different quantizers you can do. So I'm just going for a straight up, straight, solid 16th note quantize. So let's have a listen. Okay, so unfortunately Logic didn't quite hear that that's where the snare went, because obviously I wasn't able to drum 100% in time because of the latency, so instead it's gone ahead and assumed that's where that snare hit should go. If you get that and it does sound really odd and wrong, you might want to go back and look at your quantizing, check you've got the right thing set up, and if all else fails you have to go in and manually edit the drums. So that's where we're going to go with this. So if you can hear, okay, so it came one late, so we need to push that forward. So it's moved everything back. It's moved everything back a little bit, which is slightly annoying, but we're gonna have to work with it. Okay, so I have quantized and checked over all the drum hits to make sure everything's in time, and at this point we've got the basic kick and snare pattern that goes with the guitars. Again, we can go into more detail on all the small nuances, but I think it's best to keep it as a general overview. So at this point we've got all the drum hits and everything sort of synced up with the guitars. Now it's going to sound a bit odd because there's no cymbals, and also the velocities of the drum hits aren't exactly powerful. They're kind of half there. So what I need to do is go ahead and adjust the velocity of everything. So I like to start out by just putting the velocity all the way up and then coming down from there, because for the style of music I'm doing, being rock and metal and stuff, more often than not you want a powerful drum sound, and then you want to bring the dynamics down where necessary rather than go the other way. So all I'm going to do here is I'm going to highlight everything, go to my velocity editor, and I'm going to bring it all up to full whack. So now, as you can see, it's all red. It means it's all super powerful. So let's have a quick listen to what we've got. So there you go, as you can hear it's all fairly synced up, which is nice. So at this point it's really important to start adding your cymbals and your crashes and all that kind of stuff that makes it feel more lively. And for this I don't actually use my MIDI keyboard anymore. As I said before, I use the micro key for basic kick and snare work, because it's much easier for me and for all those who also play drums to just play in your rhythms with your hands. And especially with this genre of music, everything's quite syncopated, meaning that my hands can sort of pick out all those little accents on the guitars, which is, it works a lot faster for me. So I'm going to put the keyboard down and I'm going to start looking at how I can go about creating cymbal work and all those things that really make the genre, the drum track burst, really, if that makes sense. First thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to have some crashes. So it's worth noting at this point that the programming and the MIDI data that's already in there can be really useful when it comes to wanting to add cymbals quickly, because more often than not cymbals are going to land with kick drums. And if they're not, they might land on the odd snare here and there where you're doing two hits at the same time. And for the most part, hi-hats are going to be staying quarter notes, except for those odd little bits. So to be honest, you can see on the grid where they're going to go. If I'm having a look here, I can see that we've got, this is the start of my pattern, and then every four cells there is a slightly bigger line, which suggests that's the quarter note. So I can go ahead and lay down my hi-hats over those quarter notes. And they're going to want to come down in velocity, but for the start we're going to have them on full. So let's have a look. And then once I've got 4, I usually highlight them and then copy 4 across because it's much faster. And then 8 across. So let's have a quick listen. We're going to want another cymbal there. So at this point I might want to add a cymbal to go at the beginning of this little fill and then one on the snare to suggest we're going to the next section. Okay, so that works. Something I might want to add at this point, when the rhythm changes, I might want to syncopate some cymbals and kicks with that guitar rhythm. So, as you can hear, at the minute we've got it going straight with the hi-hats. But there's a few nice little kicks there that might stand out if we add a few cymbals here and there. At this point I think we're about to leave that section, so I reckon we'll bring it up in dynamic and go to a crash. Something you may have noticed is that I've added this little fill here, and the reason I did that was because I knew those were the notes that I wanted to add, but I didn't want them all to be on the snare and the kick, so I get a chance to now move them around to different drums and see what works. So I'm reckoning snare, kick, then 2 toms. So there you go. Or I might want to do 2 toms, so like, or I might want to go snare tom. So now we should have a fill that sounds like this. So that works really well, I think. Now let's move on to the verse section. So we want the hi-hats to close up a little bit for this, but we want it still to be quite aggressive. So at this point, because we're about to go into the next section, needs to be a bit heavier. So we open them up gradually. So as you can see, I've moved some hi-hats around. Well, I actually just moved the one around, but that's going to open up. It's going to sound more human. Now we go into our next section, which is going to be quite fun. Because I really wanted to try this for a while, so I'm going to do some open hi-hats, disco style, on this next section. One thing to mention is when you want to do open and choked hi-hats, you have to add the choked or the stepped hi-hat sound to immediately stop any open hi-hats. So you see how it just shuts, and that's really useful in creating offbeat stuff like this. Okay, so now I've got the general drum track laid out. As you can see, it's all red and it's all very full intensity and stuff, so it's going to be nice to sort of break that up a little bit by lowering some of the velocities. So we're going to want to get our velocity tool out, start messing around with the ones that are a bit unnatural at full volume. Okay, so looks like for the most part we've got some nice mild dynamics in here and there. To be fair, it's quite a high octane track, so it's better to have it all full whack for the most part. But for the offbeat disco drum section, might add some little ghosties here and there on the snare. I might want to do so at the minute this is going to sound horrible. But that's not the point. We're going to make them smaller and quieter. So we need to add these ghost notes back. Okay, so as you can see, we have a full drum track for the first bit of this song. Now, I haven't gone overboard on ghosties and little accents here and there and fills and stuff, because at this point it's going to be hard to hear exactly what I want to do without having sort of the bass and a few other bits and bobs going on. But the idea with this was to give you a sort of brief overview on how you'd go about creating aux sends, so that you can have all your drums out here and you can see them all working. So it's very cool, and what's nice is it starts to give you the idea that a song is coming about. So there you go, that's how you go about sort of programming drums to a guitar part or more complex drum parts, and it's basically following the same format. It takes a little bit more time, but the more you do it, the faster you get. And the idea is that it just, you know, having the guitar there almost writes your drum parts for you in a way, you know, with regards to, you know, your kick patterns and snare off beats and stuff. And you follow the same method, kick and snare on a MIDI keyboard or whatever's most comfortable for you. And then you can start to look at where cymbals go by where your kicks are falling, so on and so forth. Using the grid in the piano roll helps massively for most stuff with regards to hi-hats and things, because, you know, they're all metronomic and written out on a grid. I've shown you how to go about splitting out all your drums into aux sends, and that's something that, again, we'll go into further detail on episode 3 when it comes to mixing drums. We'll carry on with this track, and I'll put down some bass and we'll start looking at this section, how we mix it and make it sound nice and punchy. But yeah, so that's the brief overview on creating an aux send and then programming for writing and starting to construct a song. So stay tuned for episode 3, we're going to start mixing the drums I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope it's been insightful for you. Any questions on anything, please write them in the comment section below. I'll have this Superior Progressive Foundry template for you in the description box. And yeah, until the next one, I'll see you soon.